Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Michaela Musilova. I wish I could join you live at the summit today, but I'm actually going to be doing a research and educational expedition in Tibet to Mount Everest at the time of the summit. So I've had to pre-record this in advance, but I hope you're having a great time learning a lot of new things. And if you would like to ask me any questions or get in touch with me, I will share my contact details at the end of my presentation. So please stay tuned. All right, so let me start my presentation. Hopefully this is going to work just fine. Let me get it started. So my presentation is called When Your Dream is to Go to Mars. And that's actually been my dream since I was a little girl. It started off with love for nature, which quickly also changed to love for space. But I never really knew how to get closer to this dream, and I've been kind of improvising my whole life. And maybe to get started, I'll mention that this is me. I'm not actually on Mars, though it looks that way. It's actually during a simulated Martian mission, and I will tell you all about how I got to Mars to some degree throughout my life and what I'm trying to do now, having this experience, and hopefully share some information with you that might be useful with your challenging dreams and plans. This is how it all started when I was a little girl. Sorry, my computer isn't cooperating. There we go. You can see me in the picture on the bottom left, wearing kind of a simulated astronaut suit when I was about 8 years old. And I had a chance to visit a NASA center thanks to my parents. And it's around that time in my life that I started connecting the dots about what I wanted to be when I grow up. I knew I wanted to do science. I loved Earth, but I also wanted to know more about space. And ideally, I wanted my job to be searching for aliens. And that's essentially how I made my way to astrobiology. So, searching for alien life, but also trying to understand how life came to be on Earth in the first place and our place as humans in the universe, including going beyond Earth. But I wasn't, again, sure exactly how to get to astrobiology. At the time, that word didn't even really exist, wasn't used very much. And I grew up in Slovakia, that's where I'm from. And there, the possibilities of getting anywhere close to space were very slim, basically non existent, until in 1999, we had our first Slovak astronaut or cosmonaut. You can see him on the picture on the left. His name was Ivan Bela, and he was able to go to space through a cooperation between Slovakia and Russia. Let's call it an exchange program where debt was involved, and in exchange for not having to deal with the debt in certain ways, we were able to send someone from our country to space. And that was very eye-opening for someone like me because it suddenly showed me that actually Slovakians may be able to find a way to go to space. And I really hope to be the first Slovak woman to do that. Not so much for any pride or anything like that to be the first, but more that I wanted to show that we women are capable of the same things as our male colleagues, even in extreme careers like being astronauts. And what was even more special about this kind of epiphany I had was that it happened when I was able to meet both Ivan Bela and Gene Cernan, the last man for now who has been on the moon as a part of the Apollo 17 mission. He had Czech and Slovak roots, and my father, who was a diplomat, he was able to organize a meeting between these two gentlemen. And it was after meeting them that I finally connected all the dots and realized that, oh, actually, going to space as an astronaut and doing astrobiology research there would be the perfect job for me. That's exactly what I wanted to do and strive towards, as well as show that women can do these difficult types of jobs as well, whether in space or doing science. So that's basically how it all started. But being from Slovakia and having modest means in my family, it was tough to figure out how to get to these space dreams. So I knew from an early age that I would probably have to study abroad and save a lot of money to do that because tuition fees at international universities are not very cheap. So I spent most of my middle and high school years working while studying to be able to save up as much money as possible. I also try to get the best possible grades so that I would be able to get scholarships to universities. American universities were way too expensive for me, but in the UK, University College London, UCL, had a great program where you could combine geology and astrophysics. You can see me as a geologist in the middle picture and doing astronomy work at the University of London Observatory. So yeah, a combination of geology and astrophysics. That was the closest thing I could figure out towards my astrobiology dream. And so I worked really hard. I was able to get scholarships to get to UCL. But even once I was there in London, everything was so expensive that I would have 3 jobs while studying to try and make ends meet. And I applied for every single grant I came across. I even asked for charities for help. So it was a very tough time. But I kept trying because I just wanted to find a way to be able to do what I loved. And I also tried to find a way to add biology to my studies to finally get to the astrobiology, which I was always fascinated with. Oh, sorry, accidentally clicked a button there. And actually, it was in the second year of my degree program that there was a competition in the UK, and they had 2 places at Caltech. At the time, that university in the US was considered the best in the world, at least in the fields that I was in. So I tried my best to apply for a scholarship to get there because I knew I could never financially afford to go there at the time. I think you had to pay about $50,000 worth of tuition. And I'm very grateful that I was selected as one of 2 people to get this great scholarship. And so I was able to finally add biology to my studies. And so you can see me doing some biology and geology work in the pictures on the right. And that's how I was able to get to the US. I was 21 years old at the time, or actually, I was 20 years old when I got to the US. And I was 21 when I won a research grant to work at NASA JPL, which is a NASA facility in Los Angeles, also where Caltech is located. And at the time, they were preparing the Curiosity rover, which you can see in the picture in the middle, already on Mars. And when we were preparing it, it looked more like what you see in the picture on the right. So working in clean labs to make sure we don't contaminate the robot and all the technology that went with it into space and all the way to Mars. So we're trying to minimize any kind of contamination from Earth, and that's called planetary protection because we're trying to find life on Mars, not bring it there ourselves. Though with the number of rovers and other devices humans have sent into space, there is actually a pretty big chance that we have contaminated Mars and other places in the universe. And that was actually part of the research that I was doing there. I was trying to see how we can prevent this from happening and what are the chances that we actually already did that. And as a thank you for my work there, I was able to put my signature into the rover Curiosity, which has been on Mars since 2012, if I remember correctly. So that was a very nice cherry on top of the cake during my work there. And I'll just mention it wasn't easy to get into NASA at the time, and I think this might still be valid today. International students are not allowed to work for NASA. It's to do with visas and other restrictions. And when I found out about that, I was very disappointed because I thought I was so close to finally getting into NASA and working on astrobiology, kind of research that I always dreamt of. And so when I contacted researchers at NASA, sharing my ideas and trying to find ways to work with them, they told me that this was an issue. However, one of them, after he saw my enthusiasm and a determination not to just give up because of these different bureaucratic matters, he said that he actually knew of someone that was able to win a research grant, and then they were able to work at NASA as a visiting researcher rather than a student. And so he encouraged me to try that. And fortunately, it worked out. It took a few months to get that grant and all the necessary permits. But it's just to show that many times, even though some things may seem that they're not going to work out, there are so many other ways one can make things happen. Of course, legally and ethically and all that. And that has also been something very important to me, to always do things the right way, even though, okay, maybe I found some shortcuts or some loopholes that made things work in my life. I've always tried to make sure that it was never in a way that it could hurt anyone else or be unethical in any sort of way. And it's also actually the reason why to this day I don't have US citizenship, because I didn't want to just marry to get citizenship or find some other means that I guess weren't according to my own principles. But back to this story. So after I was able to do some really interesting research at Caltech and at NASA JPL, I had to go back to Europe for visa reasons. And I decided to continue studying these extreme life forms, or basically microorganisms that can survive in extreme conditions, because that's the most likely thing we will probably find on Mars or elsewhere in the universe when we find some first alien life. And the best places to study them on Earth is to go to different extreme environments and learn about what the limits of life are. So here I am during my PhD. I went to places like Greenland. I also won grants to do research in Japan and other really exciting places. And I was trying to understand whether something can survive at all in these very cold environments like the surface of glaciers, where, as you can see from the picture, there isn't exactly very much to provide nutrients and other things life needs to survive. But what I found after examining these glaciers with a team of researchers from around the world is that actually, and if you have a closer look at the picture in front of you, you'll see that next to me there's a lot of these brown patches on the ice. And that's a mixture of dust that's been blown onto the surface of glaciers, but also microbes. And these microbes basically just need some nutrients from the wind-blown dust or things that are melted out of the glacier and light. And through photosynthesis, they can create huge amounts of organic matter. And that's very important because they can feed ecosystems thanks to this organic matter, but also we could use this to our advantage as humans. If we work with these organisms that can create large amounts of nutrients in very difficult conditions, we could potentially even start growing food on Mars. And that's when I started kind of linking my work in astrobiology with Mars missions. But another thing that's really interesting is it gives us a lot of hope, this type of research, that there could still be life today, and even in very extreme places in our solar system. Like, for example, you can see the moon Europa in the picture on the top left, which is a moon that's covered in ice. And there are other similar moons in our solar system that are very cold, but perhaps there could be life that survives under similar conditions to what we have in Greenland there. But it was this research that actually got me on my first simulated Mars mission. The mission took place at the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah. You can see that in the picture in the middle. It's this facility kind of in the middle of the desert. It really looks and feels like you're on Mars there. And again, it was one of those situations where there was a call for the first British crew to do this Martian simulated mission. I'm not British, but I was doing my PhD at a British university, so I thought, okay, let's give it a try, see what happens. Maybe they'll like me as a crew member and like my research projects, and so hopefully my nationality won't be so much of an issue. And that's indeed what happened. They selected 3 of my research projects. They liked my experiences with NASA and working in extreme conditions. And so I represented the British university I was doing my PhD at, and I was able to be part of this first British crew to go on a Martian simulated mission. And that mission actually went really well. So a couple of years later, I was selected to be commander of another mission at this facility, and I came back. That's in the picture on the top right. In the picture on the top, sorry, in the bottom right, you can see me holding some, I think it was spinach that I was growing in soil that was a combination of simulated Martian soil and these microbes from extreme environments, like from Greenland, that we have been using to fertilize Martian-like soil. So there's really a strong potential in that to help us prepare for future real missions to Mars. And so while I was developing my career abroad, I did always feel kind of sad that in Slovakia things weren't moving forward very much in the space sector. So after my PhD, I decided, if there's a time to go back home and try and make some changes for the better there, it was the time then. And that's why after my PhD, I decided to go back. I joined a team of young people from the Slovak Organization for Space Activities, SOSA. they had this ambitious plan of building the first Slovak satellite called SK-Cube. You can see it on the picture on the right. And next to my head on the picture on the left, that's me inside a clean room. And we wanted to show that Slovakia had the potential to build space technologies. And most importantly, we wanted to convince the Slovak government to have Slovakia join the European Space Agency. And that would open many doors for young people, researchers, space companies. Because at the time, for every euro that was invested in the space sector, it would return 4 times as much. So this ambitious project is something we took on, a group of people mostly under the age of 30, and it worked really well. This satellite led to the development of multiple new technologies, from which multiple startups were created. Now, in great part thanks to this project and our efforts, Slovakia is an associate member of the European Space Agency, and we have over 50 companies in Slovakia that do space research and technology development. So this was a great win. However, unfortunately, at the time, not everyone was delighted that a young woman was making so many changes in my country back home. And I actually, unfortunately, had to deal with a backlash of a lot of people trying to spread misinformation about me in the media, social media, that I never worked for NASA and various other not very nice things. They try to discredit this project of the satellite. So it was actually a very dark time for me. A couple of my colleagues even collapsed, had to go to the hospital. People tried to blackmail me. And in the middle of all that, a good friend of mine gave me a very good advice. He said that, just don't worry about these haters, so to speak, and just, keep doing what I'm doing, and it's my successes that will speak for themselves. And actually, right when this happened, I was selected by NASA to go on a simulated mission in Hawaii in collaboration with the University of Hawaii. And in a way that kind of, proved my point without me having to really do anything else. And so I took this opportunity just to have a break from all the negative things that were happening back home. You can see me here in the picture on the right when I first came to Hawaii. And unfortunately, even though this mission didn't go according to plan, the silver lining was that afterwards I was offered the position of becoming the director of this facility in Hawaii called High Seas. And I ended up running over 40 simulated missions to the moon and Mars there, and I was the commander of over 30 of these missions. But it was not an easy decision because in Slovakia at that point, I was the head of the Slovak Organization for Space Activities. I had just started a startup company as CEO. I was a professor at a university teaching astrobiology, so a lot of firsts. So it was really hard for me to leave, but I found with time that actually I can do so much more for my country from abroad than it was to deal with, unfortunately, a lot of those negative things back home. And so I made sure to always bring Slovak technology, Slovak student projects on my missions in Hawaii and other international projects. Here are some examples of, for example, some Slovak space companies that I still work with today, Space Scavengers, Neutronics, and I brought a Slovakian rover on my missions. And so to this day, I always try to have, as we say, one foot back home and trying to help Slovakia, even though I might not be based there full time anymore. And so let me tell you a little bit about these simulated missions, since I've mentioned them a few times. So this is the station High Seas. It is located on the volcano Mauna Loa in Hawaii at approximately 2,500 meters or 8,200 feet. As you can see in this picture, the environment there really looks like you could be on Mars or on another planet. And we live and work inside that small dome. We go outside wearing spacesuits, just like if we were on Mars. This is what it looks like from the inside. It might seem spacious, but the reality is you have essentially no privacy except in your tiny bedroom, which you can see an example of in the picture on the right with me for scale. And then you have to share everything else with 5 other people. And so, for example, you might be working on some important project on your computer, and behind you, there's going to be someone running on the treadmill. Perhaps, they're listening to music you don't like. Their body odor might not be great. There'll be sounds coming from the kitchen of people cooking, eating, and all that. So we specifically look for people that are very patient, adaptable, that are able to work under these not always very comfortable conditions, and that want to work really for humanity to help advance us forward, both in technologies, but also with regards to human factors. And I will talk a little bit more about that shortly. And just to give you a bit of an idea of how things work there, we try and really make everything be as if we were the first people on Mars living under these very restricted conditions, which means, for example, we have very limited amounts of water to take, I wouldn't even call it showers with, but we call it bucket showers. So that's what that red bucket on the picture on the right is about. We only fill it to about a third, so maybe a couple of liters of water or 1 gallon or so. And we can shower with that only once every 2 weeks. So imagine that. That's basically your hygiene. For washing dishes, we also have a bucket system. You can see in the picture on the left. We essentially only change water in one of those 3 buckets once a day. So again, very limited, not always very nice, but it's likely how people will have to live during the first missions to Mars with restricted supplies. That also applies to food. Everything is freeze dried, so it either looks kind of like dog food, as you can see in the pictures on the right. The top right is beef and bottom is chicken, or in the form of powder. If you're lucky, you can have some team members that may be able to use this food and cook something similar to what we have on Earth. If you're not lucky, you're eating basically this porridge type muck you can see in the picture on the top in the center every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which can be very hard. Again, part of the experience for us to realize just how important food is and how we have to be able to make it not only diverse for our stomach's sake, but also for our emotions, because otherwise, if people don't like what they're eating, it's very hard to force them to eat. And of course, that can be a problem long term. The whole time that we're on these missions, we are being monitored from mission control, which is something like the equivalent of NASA Houston. You might know from movies. We have this one facility you can see in the picture on the bottom right. When we're doing a lunar simulation, there's only a several second time delay in communicating, which means, you essentially could call someone on the moon. It'll just be a very kind of choppy call, like if you call someone who has bad reception. But with a Mars mission, we impose a 20-minute time delay, which means that even if something bad were to happen, like if someone broke a leg, it would take at least 20 minutes for our message from Mars to go to Earth and another 20 for a response to come back. So we would have to wait at least 40 minutes to get some help from Earth, which could mean that, a critical situation could become very bad or lethal. And that's why we train crew members during Martian simulated missions to be very independent and not wait for help from Earth, because it might be too late by the time it comes. And our schedules are very busy, filled with research activities, exercises. We have to write reports about what we do, ask permissions for what we want to do the next day. You can just see some examples here. I also, when I'm the commander, I encourage my crew members to socialize so we can build bonds between each other, get to know each other better. But usually our schedule is broken down sometimes into 5-minute intervals, just like for astronauts on the International Space Station. And in terms of research, let me just briefly mention some of the work that we do. Here I am on top of a lava cave. These lava caves form during volcanic eruptions. We know that similar types of caves exist potentially on Mars, and we're hoping to find some alien life forms there today. And that's why we go and study lava caves in similar environments on Earth, like here in Hawaii. If you look at the picture on the left, on the top, you can see some discoloration on the walls of the caves, and those are microbes that survive in these extreme conditions. And again, something similar to what we're hoping to find on Mars one day. And you can see sometimes we have to climb into these caves. Some of them are big enough for us to walk through, or even potentially build a station inside. Then we test different technologies like the spacesuits that we're wearing. In the picture on the left, we're also testing satellite technology so that we can communicate better with Earth, also to forecast weather and things like that. And we have some rovers that we test during our missions as well. I think the one on the right was in collaboration with NASA as part of a bigger project. And then we do a lot of human-based research. And these pictures, you can see us wearing these so-called mood collars, which are supposed to tell how we're feeling to the rest of the crew. So for example, in the picture on the left, we're doing a team exercise where we had to turn over a tiny towel that four of us were standing on, and we had to turn it over while standing on it without touching the ground because the ground is lava, sort of thing. And you can see all our mood colors are blue because we're highly focused on this exercise. Then in the picture on the top right, we were doing something like, I wouldn't call it speed dating because it was not for romantic purposes, but we're just trying to get to know each other quickly during this exercise. So we're talking about our brothers and sisters and cats and dogs and having a good time. And you can see all of our mood sweaters are kind of this pinkish purple color. But then we had to do an exercise that not everyone was very happy about in the picture on the bottom right. And you can see everyone has slightly different colors of the mood sweaters, and it was very telling about how everyone was feeling. And the purpose of this experiment was to see whether it's better that our feelings are literally shown on us to others, and in that way help with communication, or just to encourage and teach crew members to communicate better about how they're feeling to prevent potentially some negative feelings building up and exploding, so to speak, at some point and causing major issues in the crew. And one of my biggest takeaways from these many missions is how very important empathy is. I always thought it was the key to the success of missions. It helps us get to know each other better, have understanding for each other. When something goes wrong, we want to help each other out. And so here are just a couple of examples. In the picture on the right, I had just learned that a family member had passed away, and I was a commander of a mission. I couldn't go to the funeral. I couldn't even, pick up the phone and call my family at the time. And it was really hard. And I think a lot of people would have probably, kept to themselves and would worry about compromising their mission. But I decided I wanted to tell my crew about it. I was very honest about how I was feeling, how I actually had to step back from my role as commander because of how challenging the situation was. And my crew was very understanding and very helpful. And we only had 2 windows in the whole station, and it was typical for us to at least go to one of the windows at least once a day as a kind of escape from our reality. So here I was kind of escaping my reality and trying to connect with my family back home, at least in some shape or form. And I'm very grateful to my crew for being so understanding and helping me get through this very difficult time. And in the picture on the left, is one of my fondest memories of the simulated missions. It was my very last mission at high seas as a commander. And the crew in this very tight space with almost no privacy was somehow able to surprise me and baked a cake from freeze-dried pineapples as a kind of thank you for my work. And so it's even these little things like that can really bring people together and create an environment of a space family, as I like to call it. So I'm very grateful I have space family all around the world thanks to these missions. And it's been my goal while at high seas to open up facilities like high seas to people from all around the world. Before, let's say, it was much more restricted, and my goal was to encourage more women, people of different minorities to join these missions. And I'm very happy to say that indeed the diversity has increased a lot during my time at high seas. Towards the end of my time there, over 60% of the applicants for missions there were women, which made me very happy. And the more diverse the crews were, the more successful the missions were. We were simply able to problem solve better, get along better. And then we also try to create conditions better for people who normally wouldn't even be able to take part in missions like these. For example, in the picture on the right, you may notice the lady in the middle is missing part of her leg. She was part of a series of missions that we were creating for para-astronauts, so astronauts who have some kind of physical disability. And we were trying to make these missions more accessible to them because many of them are very talented and can contribute to the space sector in many ways, but we didn't want them to not be able to participate just because of some of these disabilities. And so they actually turned out to be a great member of our crew. We're very grateful to have them. And in a way, these missions were also preparations for what if something, bad happens in the future during a real mission in space? We also have to be prepared to accommodate for people that may have some unexpected disabilities come up in the future. So that was part of our research too. And a very important thing for me is doing educational and outreach work. I always try to have a journalist, a teacher, an artist, or someone different from your typical astronauts to be on the crew, to diversify the crew, but also to help tell our stories to the public, to make the work that we do more accessible to everyone. So here's some examples of, for example, a documentary called Space Drop that was filmed during our missions. And the picture on the bottom right, you can see me holding a student experiment designed by high school students in Slovakia. It was part of a series of competitions called Mission to Mars that I've been organizing in Slovakia for many years. And they thought that, well, instead of just cutting off our hair and throwing it away every so often when it grows during long duration space missions, why don't we dissolve the hair? That's the brown liquid I'm holding in my hand, and use it as fertilizer. And that was a genius idea. And this fertilizer actually worked better than most of the fertilizers we had on our missions. Even National Geographic filmed something about it. So, sorry. So it was great for me that I was able to involve young people in my missions too. And they came up with such amazing ideas that are now being used at stations all around the world. However, just to wrap up, to tell you a little bit what I'm doing these days, as much as I love doing these missions and being the commander and working with diverse teams from all around the world, I must say that in all my experiences in industry, academia, and working with NGOs and other environments, sadly, I repeatedly faced various toxic work conditions, and I've faced issues with a severe pay gap compared to my male colleagues. And so with time, I decided it's better to start something of my own. And I founded two nonprofits. I have one in the US called Extreme Frontiers, one in Slovakia named after myself. And through these organizations, I run a number of research and educational projects, kind of on my own terms, and finally working under much better work conditions too. So one of them that I'll quickly tell you about is called the Astro 7 Summits Project. The goal of this project is to go to the tallest summit on each continent and to do research, continuing in collaboration with NASA and other institutions around the world, but also bring a lot of student experiments with me and also to film documentaries. So here I am on Kilimanjaro. It is one of the 4 expeditions I've completed to date. I will be going to Everest actually, well, around the time of this summit. That's why I won't be able to join you live. And then after that, I have 2 more expeditions coming up. So here they're just shown where in the world I have been going and still plan on going. And as I mentioned, I continue to do my astrobiology research during these expeditions, still working with NASA and even some institutions in Slovakia and other parts of the world. I also test different technologies. For example, in the picture on the left, I was testing a satellite technology that followed us as we climbed Kilimanjaro and was sending important information in case we needed to be rescued or we wanted to share some research data with our team members. And in the picture on the right, I am testing an educational experiment from middle school children in Australia. That's a little flower that's in the ground there in that picture. And in this way, they can contribute to a big citizen science project I'm doing all around the world where people can monitor their environmental conditions in different parts of the world and compare it and also see how things are changing now with climate change. And that's actually just wanted to show very briefly here for comparison. In the picture on the left, there I am with my team on top of the summit of Kilimanjaro. And maybe you can see in the distance, there are some glaciers there. And when my father went to Kilimanjaro 3 decades ago in 1995, you can see glaciers are actually very close to the summit where he was. So we can visibly see huge changes happening all around the world in glaciers and other extreme conditions, which means there'll be less access to drinking water for not only the animals and plants that live near these summits, but also for the human populations there, which will likely lead to more mass migration. So another thing I'm just trying to alert people to that's happening all around the world, and I've been witnessing it during each and every one of my expeditions. And then I go and talk to the public and young people around the world about my work, try and engage them in what I do and teach them something new, and also importantly, inspire them to follow their dreams, just like I've been following my childhood one. And actually, we've even started building a simulated space station in Slovakia as part of my outreach efforts. And then I film documentaries during each expedition, which are also meant to help make science and space more accessible to the public. Sometimes I have to film them completely by myself in the wilderness, which has been a added challenge to my recent type of work that I do. And since I have to fundraise for all this work that I do now for my nonprofits, I've been, for example, selling patches designed by NASA patch designer, supporting my expeditions. I'm also working currently on an English version of my autobiography called A Woman from Mars. Here's a picture of me with it, the Slovak version during the Martian mission. And here are my contact details if you would like to get in touch, if you have any questions or would like to collaborate with me or support my projects in any way. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a great summit.